Hello everyone, my name is Vicki Ayers. I am the QuickBooks and Quoting Tech Support Specialist with Minutes Matter. I am also a QuickBooks Pro Advisor for Intuit. Today's webinar will be about the 4 Ds to easy quoting. Plan your work and work your plan. It's some of the oldest and best advice for a successful business. The same advice is true for the successful use of QuickBooks. If you have a plan for how to do something, when you start an estimate in QuickBooks and then you work your plan, quoting is going to become routine and easy for you. And I have up here the 4 Ds of quoting that I'm going to demonstrate today. Once you have your header done, which is this area up at the top of a quote, the next step is to decide what to sell. And you work your way from the top to the bottom, deciding what to sell your customer in this quote. And we always start with some kind of group, a G- group or a GP- group. Now I'm going to demonstrate each one of these step by step in an actual QuickBooks company file showing an estimate, but I wanted you to see where we were going to be going as I started the quote, so I brought up this little screenshot for you. The second thing that I like to do is edit all of my descriptions. Describe what it is that you just decided to sell. So you decide what to sell, then you describe those things. You edit all of these descriptions so they're customized for this particular quote. And then you determine your quantities for each one of those things. And that's the third area right there, determining the quantities. And then the last thing you will do is double check that your cost and your markups are where they need to be to either achieve your income goals for your markup and the actual costs that are going to be associated with this job. So decide what to sell, describe those things, determine the quantities involved, and then double check your cost and markup. Let's go to QuickBooks so we can see this in person. Here's an empty quote in QuickBooks, and of course we have to fill out the header first. So we'll start with the Miller Sunroom. George Jones is the designer, and the design firm is Drexel Furniture. So there's our customer and our job. And I'm going to tab through the fields in the top so that we can make sure that we have everything chosen that we want. Everything looks good. We don't have any terms for this customer. So I'm going to choose the due on receipt terms, and we'll indicate a delivery date of about 6 weeks out. So I'm going to hit the K key, K for the last letter in the word week. Will take us to the last day of this week. And then I'm going to hit it 6 times so I can see what my target date is if I want to stay within a 6-week time frame on this job. K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's my target date if I want to stay within 2 weeks or 6 weeks out. Even if you don't provide this number to your customer, it gives you a nice deadline goal to hit if you're trying to maintain your lead times. Now I'm in the decide column, deciding what to sell. And we always say that this is the most important field of the entire quote, this very first field. Because if you will always start with a group here, your quoting will be 75% done because you don't have to go out and look and decide, pick out all the little individual items you need if you start with a group. And in QuickBooks and Quoting, we've named all of our groups to start with either G- or GP-. So let's look at what GP- does. If you take a GP-, you get all of the things that start with a GP. And those are all of those groups, and now you can choose a group that pertains to the quote that you're going to try to do. The P stands for print item detail. So by choosing a group that will print the item detail, you can actually create a quote that will have all of the line items exposed and available for your customer to see when you print it. Now my personal favorite for creating a quote is what is called a summary style quote. For that, I'm going to type G-. That brings up all of the groups that are summary style quotes. It's the group that you choose that determines whether something is a summary style or whether it is an itemized detail quote. Next month's easing is going to talk about some of the specific things and the differences between them and why you might want to do something one way or another as you quote with your customers. So next month's easing is going to have all kinds of information about workarounds for getting a detailed copy when you created a summary style. But we'll deal with that next month. So today we're going to do a summary style quote for a drapery. So this G-drapery group is the one I want to choose. Now remember that groups are pre-selected collections of individual items so that we can quote quickly. When I click on this, we're going to get a lot of items come onto our estimate all at one time because they were included in this group. There we go. So I chose a group in the first column. Now I'm going to arrow down with my arrow down key on my keyboard. Just did the keyboard that has an arrow pointing down. This first item, we always ask ourselves these three questions. Do I want to keep this one? Do I want to delete this one? Do I want to switch it up to a different kind of item? I think that it's fine for it to come in as a default to a pinch pleat, but I'm going to do a Euro pleat this time. So I'm going to change it to a similar item by clicking on the drop-down arrow. We already have a drapery in the slot, so when I hit my drop-down arrow, I'm already in the drapery aisle or area of our item list, so I can just scroll up gently and pick up my Euro pleat. And I just switched from pinch pleat to Euro pleat. Now, using my down arrow key again, I have a trim item and my labor item for applying trim. And we are going to have some trim on this quote, so I'm going to keep that one. I'm not going to delete it. I'm not going to change it to a similar item. Keep, delete, or change. Arrowing down, we are going to have some banding on this quote, so I will keep it. Arrowing down, I don't think we'll do any hand sewing this time, so this is one I want to delete. Comes up by default, so I don't forget to charge for those kinds of surcharges. And I'm going to hold down my Control key and hit my Delete key one time gently. If I were to hold my finger down on it, it would delete a whole bunch of things all at one time. So I'm just going to hold down Control and hit Delete one time gently. And it's gone. Now, I do want to have some interlining labor on this because we're going to interline these drapes. So I'll keep that one. I'm going to keep my main fabric, my contrast fabric for the banding, and my trim other. Now I can be a little more specific, so I'll change this to a similar item by clicking on the drop-down arrow, and I'm going to choose brush fringe. And now I'm going to arrow down again. I believe I'll keep this wood pole, wood rings, wood brackets, and wood finials. And then I'm going to arrow down, and I'm going to keep my cotton sateen ivory. Maybe I'll switch that up to a white lining. Keep, delete, or change. When we want to change it to a similar item, we choose the drop-down arrow, and we just choose the white. Arrowing down, I'm going to switch up to a white interlining, and that one has been made inactive. So let's just type in, I've been working in this company file a little bit. Now arrowing down, we're going to do a render fee, a measure fee, an install fee, and we're going to estimate some shipping for our customer. So all we did in this column is we decided what to sell to the customer. And it goes very, very quickly when you keep your mind thinking about one thing all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. What are we going to sell today? Decide what to sell. The second step in the 4Ds is to describe our treatment. So I'm going to come back up here to the beginning, and I'm going to first make notes about how big our treatment is. 100 finished width by 97 finished length. And I'm going to describe it a little bit more to say that it is a lined, interlined, banded, and brush fringe on lead edge. And now we can see that if our treatment is 97 inches finished length, see that right there? There's really only one line of text that pertains and has the yardage prompts that we need for this quote. So we can just very quickly highlight the text here, hit our delete key, not our control delete, because we're not trying to remove the entire item, the whole line out of our quote, just this little bit of text, and delete. and then we have a little bit of text here to delete, and we're left with what we need in this quote. Now let me give a little space here so it's a little easier for all of you to see this information. Here's your yardage prompts, and they always mean the same thing basically as it's formatted. When you see these two numbers and they are in parentheses, the first one will always be how much yardage I need for the unit that we're working with here, which would be widths of material here. So, and it's a solid or a virtually 0-inch repeat. You know those little dobbies that, are just a very, very small repeat. So that would be 3.5 yards per width that you would need. Here is the yardage prompt if your fabric is a 27-inch repeat or less, and that's the second number. It's a safe number to calculate with because a 27-inch repeat is very, very common. If you have a smaller one, you'll still be covered with your yardage. Now, we know that our quote today is going to be a 27-inch repeat fabric. So really, all of this information is now unnecessary for the quote. So I'm going to put in 27-inch repeat. And I know that this yardage number now is going to go with my 27-inch repeat when I look at this later. The second set of numbers is for the trim, and that's that number right here. Those numbers will mean, and we always assume that you want the amount of yardage to put it on the lead edge. So this number is for each lead edge that we would have to cover would need 3¼ yards. Now the banding yardage prompt that's right here is for, this is what it means. It says I could make up to 2-inch banding, seamless, we assume, on the lead edge, we assume, with 3.75 yards and put it on 10 panels, 10 leading edges. Well, we've only got 2 panels, so that's way more than enough yardage for our contrast fabric when we get there. So these are the numbers we'll need here in a minute to put into our quantities when we get to doing that. But we've pretty much just described this particular part of the quote, the Euro pleat labor. Now, arrowing down here, we're going to either machine or adhesive this on, and that's how the charge is calculated. Arrowing down the banding that is straight, we're going to charge that by the inch. And I'm going to come back here and indicate that it will be 1.5-inch banding set in 1 inch from lead edge. The more information that you provide here and put into what is the cornerstone of your quote, or your job, which is the estimate, the easier it will be to create work orders and purchase orders when you get to that point. Now, arrowing down, we're going to add inner lining later to that, and we're going to have yards of main fabric, but I want to do some little descriptions here that this is style number 1, 2, 3, 4, and it is going to be red, and we're going to get that from Fabric-Cut. So I've just indicated the style number, the color, and the vendor in this area. Arrowing down, we'll have some contrast fabric, and that's going to be Molly, and it's going to be gold, and we'll get that from Cashmere. Style number, color, and then the vendor. Again, for the brush fringe, this will be number 12-897 in multi, and we're going to get that from Dickey. Arrowing down, we don't need to say too much more about the wood pole, maybe the finish that we would want to add to this information. And arrowing down, we'll do the same thing here. And for each one of these, if you had a style number for the finials or for the ring style or something, you could add that. So we're just describing all of our things. We don't need to add any more description to the lining or to the inner lining. The render fee, the measure fee, or the installation or the shipping charges. Now see this description right here? The one that is the grand total description. In a summary style quote, your customer is going to see this description and the big number over here. So this is where you want to spend a little time describing everything that they're going to get, everything that you do for them that's included for free, quote unquote, in your quote. You will design, you'll measure, and you'll install these treatments. It includes all the fabric and the lining and the materials and the hardware. So spend a little time here romancing the treatment so that you can build up the justification for the number for the total. So we have decided what to sell. We have described all of our things that we're selling, And now we are ready to determine our quantities. So we're going to go to this column here and determine our quantities. Well, if we were using our little legal pad off to the side and saying, well, if they're 100 inches wide and we use a 2.5 times fullness and our fabric is 54, you can do this right here in this field in QuickBooks by typing 100 and then the times key, which QuickBooks knows as being a times multiplier, which is this little star or asterisk. And see how that opens up a little calculator for us? Now I'm going to type in 2.5, and then I'm going to put in the divide sign, which is the slash. And we're going to divide it by the width of our fabric, which is 54. When I hit enter, it will calculate my widths for me. Now it calculates up to 4.62963, and we never have those kinds of widths that we charge for. We would want even numbers. And we also need to allow some for those returns and for the side hems and the overlap. So I'm just going to round this up to 5. And now I've got a 5-width job, 2.5 widths on each side. Now, if I arrow down, I can calculate my trim charge. But I think let's see, our trim is going to go on the leading edge. And we have 2 leading edges. So I'm going to do 2 times, opens up the calculator. The length of our leading edge is 97 inches, and then hit enter. That's 194 running inches. Now, that same calculation could be done for the banding, or I can just type in 194. Now, arrowing down, we're going to charge our inner lining labor charge per yard. And so I'm going to calculate my main fabric first, because we have a yardage number up here that is for a 27-inch repeat. I need 3.75 yards for each width. So I'm going to start with how many widths, which is 5. Look up here to get my yardage and say times 3.75. And then I'll hit enter. And it tells me I need 18.75 yards. Now, depending on how much allowance you want to give yourself, how much cushion room, you might want to, while it's highlighted in blue, type 19 or even add an extra yard and go to 20. So I'm going to type 19. And now I'm going to arrow down, or arrow up, and put in 19 for my inner lining labor charge. I'm going to arrow down to the contrast fabric item. And see up here where it says that I'm going to need 3.75 yards? I'm going to type that in now, because that's what I need for my yardage for the contrast for the banding. Arrowing down, I need 3.25 yards per leading edge, and I have 2 leading edges, and I'm going to multiply times 3.25. We probably all could have done that in our heads, but I like to show off that little calculator. And we're going to hit enter. And now I'm going to arrow down, and I'm going to need 9 foot for my rod. So I'm going to type in a 9, and then I'm going to arrow down. And I need, I've got 5 widths, and if I figured about 7 rings per width, I would just type in 35 here. Arrowing down, I want 3 brackets, 1 on each end and 1 in the middle. Arrowing down, I'm going to need 2 finials. I'm going to need 19 yards of lining, 19 yards of inner lining, 1 render fee, 1 measure fee, and if we want to use our calculator here to figure out the linear feet for the installation charge, we would take in 100 divided by 12, enter. We have 8.333 highlighted, so I can just hit a 9 very quickly. See how fast it goes? When you have a plan for coming in here and you decide what to sell, then describe what you're selling, then determine your quantities. The last thing you want to do is to double check all of your costs and your markups. Before I go on to that, did anybody have a question about any of these things before I just continue to go? If you have a question, you'll want to put it into the chat area of your GoToMeeting dashboard, and Anna and Debbie will respond to your questions by typing back. So if you have any questions, make sure and put them in there. Let's go to checking our cost. So double checking our cost. We're thinking about, oh, this fabric might be kind of difficult to work with. So I think just for this one time on these Euro pleats, I'm going to boost my price to 55. And then I'm going to arrow down. So that just changed the pricing for this quote this time, not ultimately in our item list. We wanted that to stay with our base price, our most of the time kind of pricing. Now, we've already set up our labor charge for trim, so we can leave that, and our banding charge at 30 cents an inch, and then our inner lining charge at 3 1/4. We checked on our main fabric, and it's going to be 27 1/4 this time. The contrast fabric is going to be 35. And then we arrowed down and we checked our pricing on the trim. It's $11. And then we checked on our pricing for the wood pole finished, and it's going to be about $15 a running foot. And then a $4 ring is going to be $5 1/4. And then we had some brackets, and they're going to be $10 each. And the finials are going to be $25. And the lining is set up at $250, 3 1/4 inner lining, the rendering fee, the measuring fee, and the installation. Now I'm just going to estimate what I have to bring in and about how much I think it'll cost, and just type in $50 for that. So we determined what, we decided what to sell, we described what we were selling, we determined our quantities, and we checked our costs. Now, if you're working on a customer's budget, and this number she told you needed to be around $3,000, you can come back in at this point and start editing some of your markups where you need to and where you can afford it in order to get back to the budget number she needs. So if you think that you can't get quite that much out of fabric in your area because you've got a lot of sourcing for fabric, you can start adjusting your markups in order to get your number for the customer to come up here within her budget. Or maybe you need to go back to her and say, in order to get this number down to around $3,000, we need to choose a new main fabric. So you double checking your cost numbers, your markup numbers to come up with your grand total number here. Let's take a look at our print preview so that we can see what our quote looks like. It is a summary style quote, so we're going to have a total here, and we're going to have one description that the customer will see there. And that's a summary style quote. And I'll just zoom it out a little bit so that you can see it a little bit closer. And now we're going to say close. And that information right there is a summary style quote. Now let's click on our Save button. In 2000 and I believe 10, we got this little Save button added up here. So we can save it without closing it or without going to a new one. And that little message was just about changing the terms in the class. Now let's take a look at a GP- quote, one that prints item detail. And I got one in here. Okay, here's one that is a GP- quote for wallpaper and installation. Has a couple of other things on it also, a GP subcontract window treatment. So if you're a designer that sells more than window treatments, QuickBooks and Quoting has fabulous groups in here for you to use. All kinds of things that designers who don't fabricate will be able to use, and where they get their number from their workroom, you just pop it in right here. You determine all of your costs over there. Now this one doesn't have it has some kind of goofy quantities. Let's do the quantities up here. We got one wallpaper installation, and one delivery fee, one shipping fee. And we've got a workroom fee, and we're just going to throw some numbers in here right now just so that we can finish up this quote. It must have been something I was working on for customer, client during the consult. And we'll get 4 yards there. We'll get 8 feet of an iron pole, 2 finials, 14 rings, and 3 brackets. And we'll do 20 yards of lining, 20 yards of inner lining. So you can see by having all these things preloaded, it makes it really easy and fast to calculate a quote. Let's take a look what it looks like. Print preview. So here we have a quote that has quantities, descriptions, and the rates and the totals. You can see how the rates didn't come out right. I didn't finish the entire quote. But A GP-group is set up so that it will show you all of those line items here. And let's see if there's another one here that maybe is a little more straightforward. Here's one. Has all of our quantities, all of our descriptions done, and it's 288704. So print preview on that one. And we have all of our, we don't have the right template chosen here. If you're using a GP-group, you should come down and pick this other template that has GP in the name. Then when you hit print preview, you'll get a quantity column and a description column and the totals. I've got a question here from Catherine. She just added a sales tax group to her item list. And she's very excited because it was a simple thing to do, and she's really excited about the fact that what she's learned in her coaching program has allowed her to do that. How do you open the calculator? Paula would like to know. Anytime that you are in a field where there's a number, you can type a number. Let's say we have 2 here, and then type one of the keys that QuickBooks recognizes as a multiplier, or as a some kind of key that does a function. Like the slash key is divide, the multiply is the star, and the minus key and the plus key, of course. So let's hit our plus key, and that opens up the calculator. Then hang on a second, 2 plus, and then if we say 22 plus 2 and hit enter, that closes the calculator and it does your little transaction. If you start out with 2 times 2 plus 6, it'll do those in order that you put them when you finally hit the enter key, and that's how the little calculator works. Turning a proposal into a purchase order. I can show you how to do that just very quickly today. We'll do that with our little quote right here. Minimize this little thing with questions in it. Bear with me. In Premier, you can generate a purchase order from the estimate, but they bury that feature like an Easter egg right here. So if you click on the little drop-down arrow, this is not available in Pro. You have to copy and paste your information into a purchase order in Pro. That's one of the things I just love about Premier. Is it's very, very convenient, and it also helps to keep your accounting lined up properly. So we click on the purchase order. We have to save it, and we're not going to do a change order. And then we want to say create a purchase order for the selected items. And then we'll say OK. And then all we have to do is just choose the things we want on the purchase order. And we've got all our hardware there on one purchase order. We'll add the shipping one on there and say OK. That creates a purchase order from all of that customized information that you had on your quote. Now, probably wouldn't be $55 for all of the shipping on this, so we'll just put a 0 in there until we receive the merchandise and we know how much it is. But we put the item on there so that we don't forget to deal with it in the other. So that is how to generate a purchase order from your estimate with just 3 clicks of your mouse using Premier. When would you use a project for a customer? I personally like to use a project for every single estimate that I make. Let's go back in here to estimates. And you see how in my hierarchy here, you have the customer is always the first level, and then the projects come below it. And this gives you the ability to run reports based on a specific project or room that you were working on versus just having to have one great big bucket that everything gets thrown into all in one place. Let's look at our Customer Center. Here in our Customer Center, you can see that Casey Green, she's one that I use a lot for my demonstrations. Everything I've ever done with her is all in here in one great big bucket. And it's hard to look for anything in there. But if I wanted to look for something in particular that we did with her dining room, you can see all the dining room things come up here together without everything else that was for the living room or for the master bedroom. As you work with customers and they come back to you for future projects, it's really nice to be able to define those and report on those based on the project and not have to try to remember dates to divide those all up in. So that's why I use customers and jobs. You have to create the customer first and then put the the hierarchy of their projects or jobs down below. Christine would like to know, I see in your customer list that you have Drexel Furniture as a customer and then listed the customer below. What that is about is where you've got multiple designers within a design firm. So your design firm becomes your customer, and then your designers get put up underneath there, and then their particular projects will come below there. What's really great about this is that sometimes you have to send the bills to the design firm, but information back to the designers, and they can quickly see in that project field when you send them estimates or invoices or something, who that information pertains to, what project it is that they're working on. And I do that with both the customer's last name and then the room that we're working on, so that they can help see what the information is that you send to them or email information to them. Maggie said it wants to know, how does it transfer? Which kind of quote is better? And that is really a personal distinction. I have wholesale customers who use all summary style. They don't detail all that for their designers. And then I have some customers that have a mix of wholesale designer clients, and they also have retail clients. And they will use summary styles for their retail, and then they'll use detail clients for their wholesale. It just depends on your customer, whether you want to go with summary styles or detail styles. And we'll talk about that, like I said, next month in a lot more detail. Can you do these quotes in QuickBooks Premier? If you are not using a quoting program like Minutes Matter, QuickBooks, and Quoting, when you install QuickBooks, it will help you create a little chart of accounts here. And that's only about 10% of the work. These are easy to create. But your QuickBooks without a quoting program in it, in your item list, this will be blank. It's like having a store with all the shelves in it and nothing on the shelves. You have nothing here to put onto a quote. You can't create a sales receipt. You can't create a quote. You can't create an invoice, because those things have to have items put on them in order to be able to make them and work. But each item that you put on those as you create them has to be linked perfectly with the chart of accounts so that your accounting is right. And that's the place that the quoting program, QuickBooks and Quoting, comes into play, is that we create this item list for you and a chart of accounts, and they are perfectly linked together so that when you sell something and when you buy something that is in your store, your list of things that you sell in your store here, you know that it's being calculated and accounted for in your accounting and in your chart of accounts perfectly. And so that's the big advantage of buying a quoting program like QuickBooks and Quoting, is that we've done 90% of the work for you. Now all you need to do is just kind of tweak it up with your pricing in order to use the quoting program to the best in your business. So we're happy to help you with that. We even help you get your chart of accounts and your opening balances and everything set up for you when you buy the quoting program. And if you've already started on your own and you think things are kind of messy, it's not a problem to start a new company file with the QuickBooks program that you have with QuickBooks and Quoting installed in it. You have to have QuickBooks, and then you buy the quoting program and we install it inside.